from our school principals?
Call us on 03030 80 55 55. Text 81771 or email the programme talk.back@bbc.co.uk.
From burning buses in Dublin to angry street protests in towns like Larne and Ballymena, Ireland, north and south, has been gripped by scenes few would have imagined just a few years ago. Anti-immigrant anger spilling out onto the streets, online rumours turning into real-world rage. The police on both sides of the border have sounded the alarm. The PSNI and An Garda Síochána have said that far-right agitators, some amplified from outside of Ireland, are flooding social media with misinformation, stoking fear and pushing volatile protests. So how did America's culture wars end up playing out on Irish streets? That's the question at the heart of the documentary Amplified, the exportation of the culture wars, with insiders from the White House, a former CIA director and leading Irish experts. The film traces a pipeline of paranoia, conspiracy and outrage and the chaos that can follow.
Unfortunately, one of our most prolific exports in recent years has been vitriol and extremism and polarization.
He brought the chaos. He opened the Pandora's box.
The radical left communists hate you, and they hate our middle class.
He was priming the pump. They would believe that other people were fake news, and they could only believe Donald Trump.
The escalation into violence seems to be an almost inevitability.
The mimicking and the influence of politics from America is definitely something that has accelerated.
You begin to see this unraveling, and it's not unconnected to the rhetoric that we see today.
This language has come from the far right. It has been, filtered kind of into the mainstream over the last number of years.
Just a taste of this new film, Amplified, the exportation of the culture wars. The film's writer and director, Mike Sheridan, is in the Talkback studio with me. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks for having me.
So, we've so much to talk about. Yeah. We'll be joined by other guests in a second. Lee McGowan, who's a professor at Queen's and specialises on the rise of far-right politics in Europe and North America, and Jeff Dudgeon from the Free Speech Union. But let's just give our audience a bit more of where this film is coming from and where it's going. And I know your film begins with the backstory, as it were, in America in terms of their culture wars coming over here. But let's start with Ireland, can we?
Okay.
With protests and riots and buses burning in Dublin following, I think the film says, following almost as an inception point, the arrival of Ukrainian refugees here. You see that as a significant moment?
I don't think the Ukrainian refugee issue is as prominent in this. I think this was after a horrendous assault on 4 kids and a carer in Dublin. And what happened was, in the aftermath of that assault, it kind of became known that the person who committed the assault and is now in jail was a foreign national, wasn't born in Ireland, and then missing this information or basically started spreading online through Telegram, through WhatsApp, through X, and with people became more and more riled up. We have some of the voice notes in the documentary, basically telling everybody to meet in the centre of Dublin city centre. The guards weren't quite prepared for it because, I suppose, how could they be? In some regards, I don't think anybody saw something as horrendous as this coming, possibly protest, possibly violence, not massive parts of the city centre being set on fire. But the Ukrainian refugee issue isn't as prominent, I don't think, unless you look at it through COVID, through the lens of COVID. It was all health. People were kind of had these conspiracies about health and these conspiracies about vaccines pre-2022, and then after the invasion in Russia, from Russia into Ukraine, then there's yet to start to be conspiracies about Ukraine. So that's one small facet of it.
Right.
But it's generally okay, these people are coming in here, quotation marks, and they're committing violence, they're doing X, they're doing Y, and that basically riled up the base.
And we hear language like military age young men.
Yeah, that's a very prominent phrase that you hear quite a lot. Like this idea of military-aged young men coming into the streets of Ireland, coming into the streets of Dublin. I mean, military-aged young men come into Temple Bar every weekend on stag weekends as well. But if you have
late teenagers,
exactly, yeah. If you have a narrative to push, then you can certainly make that type of phrasing fit that narrative.
How significant was COVID in this story in the United States? That is the rise of right-wing populism, and in Ireland.
I think COVID was very significant, at least if you look in terms of January 6th and that attempted insurrection on January 6th. People were just more susceptible to mis- and disinformation. People were looking for explanations, and they were looking for reasons as to why they couldn't, leave their homes between a certain distance of kilometres.
Yeah,
they couldn't
the lockdowns.
maybe they had to shut their businesses. So people's brains essentially broke, and they found solidarity and community, I think, in online spaces that weren't necessarily the best spaces for information.
Well, many felt that their personal freedoms were being taken away from them by the state.
Yeah, I mean,
and you can see how that can turn into an anti-establishment movement.
Yeah, absolutely. I was as frustrated as anybody during COVID. I mean, I think ironically, Donald Trump losing the election in 2020, he was the president at the time, so some of that was probably a backlash against him because he was the president, and the intrinsics of what he did and didn't do don't matter as much as he's the man in charge and I can't leave my house. To some people, that's probably what it was.
We'll be talking about January 6th, and of course that links to Donald Trump, but your film takes us back further than Donald Trump, decades further back than Donald Trump. Pat Buchanan, for example. In some ways, Donald Trump and the MAGA movement is a reversioning of some of the ideas of Pat Buchanan that he never really got off the ground with. You could even go further back, couldn't you? The Bircher Society, John Birch. So these ideas have been circulating in American cultural life for a very long time. That is xenophobia, fear, paranoia about the state, conspiracy thinking. It's always been there, right?
Yeah, I mean, Pat Buchanan, if you look, Pat Buchanan gave a speech at a Republican convention in 1992. Initially, he was challenging George W. Bush for the nomination, but then backed out, gave a speech. And if you listen to that speech, it's kind of dressed up in socio-economic rhetoric. He's not, explicitly saying, the migrants or people of colour or whatever it is. In some instances he is when it comes to homosexuals, but he's not explicitly saying it. They had the sense, at least I think then, to dress up their message a little bit in a more of a, we can change policy here, we can change aspects of policy, we can take things to Congress, take things to the Senate and have them passed. So he was very careful about his language. And then the Tea Party movement in 2008, 2009 was this reaction, I think, on the conservative side of American politics, pre-MAGA, a reaction to Obama and Obama's more progressive policies.
Michael in Ballyhalbert says the radical left caused the rise of the popular right. Discuss. It's a theory we hear.
Yeah, I mean, I would say define left and right, because it really depends on where you are in the world. So, certain governments, if you've got public healthcare or you've got universal healthcare, as they call it in America, you're considered a socialist in massive parts of the US. Mm-hmm. Whereas, to us, it's just functioning society in some respects. America's capitalist at its core, I think. But I always find that, because I see a lot of people using that language of left and right down south too. And it's like, okay, well, are you talking about it in an American context? Or are you talking about it in a European or a UK or Irish context? Because they're very, very different things. But that comes from that importation of the rhetoric from the US, where it doesn't these things don't necessarily mean the same thing.
Do you think left-right politics is really for another era?
I don't believe in monoliths. I think people are complex and people have varying views on different issues. And I think putting people into boxes.
Well, why the persistence of far-right talk then, describing a particular anti-immigrant protest as a far-right protest?
Well, I suppose there is
a populist right.
Well, that is saying that
a radical right.
Yeah, I mean that's saying rhetoric can be dangerous.
Yeah,
you can rile people up, and it can be dangerous. Donald Trump, if he hadn't become president again in 2024, would have been put on trial for instigating January 6th and that riot because of the rhetoric that he used in the weeks, months beforehand.
I'm talking about the rhetoric of the far right, because I wonder, and a lot of my audience tell me this when we talk about these issues, that there's a danger that branding things far right can actually push people further into extremism. They want to reject that language. They don't want to be put in that box because they have a concern about immigration. And it might actually nudge them away from the conversation you want them to have into the hands of somebody else who wants to fuel something else.
Well, who's saying this? The people who are, what do we call them, far right now? Are they people in online? Are they online spaces? Are they people with big social media accounts? Or are they people in Congress, in the Senate, the President of the United States? And that's a permission structure. And when that permission structure comes down, then, it can lead to violence, as we saw in Dublin in November of 2023, as we saw on January 6th, and we've kind of seen throughout. I understand people's frustrations, and I completely get them. But you have to realise certain spaces and certain people with big social media accounts aren't the monolith. They're not speaking for absolutely everybody.
I think it's a fair reading of your film to say that, and of course you're not trying to describe everything in the world, right? You're focusing on certain issues, but that concerns about immigration, concerns about diversity or the lack of integration of certain communities, maybe even concerns about Islam or other faith traditions or other cultures as they come to places like Britain and America, are being leveraged by people maybe on the other side of the Atlantic or elsewhere, outside of Ireland for sure, with social media manipulation and other kinds of psychological manipulation to try to trigger some kind of combustion, like a riot, a protest. And then you get Tucker Carlson and Steve Bannon sitting in the War Room podcast saying, so there you go, Ireland's waking up.
Yeah,
Ireland's waking up to the danger.
They claim the Irish people were rising up.
How much evidence do you have that kind of manipulation is going on?
That kind of manipulation is going on, or well, I mean,
across the Atlantic, social media manipulation.
Oh well, I mean, look at the tweets, look at the posts from around that time, particularly in November 2023, and in the aftermath of November 2023. You've got Mike Flynn, who was Trump's national security advisor for a very brief space of time, who is now a QAnon conspiracy theorist and is then on he's on the phone. We have it in the documentary. I think it was somebody in The Guardian reported on it, that he basically said QAnon he thought was a CIA op. So it's a part of it is a grift. But I mean, there wasn't just him. There's another Twitter account called Catthird, which is this far-right Twitter account.
Still there.
Posting about, Irish Lives Matter, which is clearly jumping on an American phrase that kind of originated in after George Floyd in 2020 and then kind of carrying it forward here. It's all an excuse, in my opinion, to get not just the migrant stuff, but the trans stuff, the culture war stuff in general. I'm not saying there are not issues there and there are not nuances there. But at its core, the issue, what they're trying to do here is to get people riled up as to not, really look at the policies, really look at what is being done and really look at what's not being done by those in power.
COVID was an inflection point, right? An amplification of a lot of these issues. I wonder if we're about to go through another inflection point with the Jeffrey Epstein story, because QAnon is riven with paedophile stories. And of course, there are paedophiles in the world. There are people who abuse and kill and traffic in children. But there are also conspiracies about paedophilia, which would have the entire United Nations, for example, as one big paedophile party. With all the concentration on the Jeffrey Epstein story, do you predict that could become another inflection point?
I don't think
for radicalisation.
I mean, for radicalisation, it was kind of there with QAnon in some respects. I think it was 20% of Americans believe some aspect of the QAnon conspiracy theories.
All of that,
and Pizzagate, and all of that was proven false. But if there's enough of an element of truth in it, which this sex trafficking ring and pedophilia and everything else, all those other horrendous things, if you find that 10% nugget of truth and you go, well, actually QAnon had some fair points, then that kind of does carry it forward. But in terms of the Trump administration, it's not going away.
03030 80 55 55 for your calls. Have a chat with Mike Sheridan, the director and writer of Amplified, the exportation of the culture wars. And we're asking you this question: does this sound like the world as you experience it? That there is this degree of manipulation, organised and maybe disorganised too, from across the Atlantic, but other places as well, coming into Ireland, north and south, taking advantage, manipulating people who may have ordinary, normal concerns about political issues and radicalising them into violence eventually. 03030 80 55 55. As I say, Lee McGowan is with us and Jeff Dudgeon. Welcome to you both. Jeff, give us your response first.
Right. I found the film unbalanced, seriously unbalanced, which made it a problem. There were about 10 talking heads. Everyone had the same view. I never saw any far right, let alone middle of the road view on the issues. And then it was compounded by a second problem, and I think this is the big one. Ireland and America are two different setups, but in fact they're effectively the same. So-called far-rightism has come internally. It's come from the same issues, the same problems in each of those countries, and I thought it was a bit feeble, the attempt to indicate that America was the source of all the problems that we're facing here in terms of immigration disputes and all the other disputes. So,
does he say that? Does it really say that America is the source of all of our problems around immigration, or rather that America is a big source of the radicalisation issue that we're dealing with?
Well, that's a bit of a pointless statement. In it, America is very big. It's 300 million. It's bound to have an influence. We speak English.
Sure.
But I think to understand America, and I suspect the producer maybe didn't understand America, America is a frontier society. It's English speaking. It's got a completely different outlook in many ways from the United Kingdom or Ireland, but at the same time, we're sisters and brothers. I just instance, and I go on to speak about Mike speaks about misinformation. Well, I think there's another big problem, and the BBC is guilty of it. It's called non-information. You can't criticise something that you don't even see or hear or is spoken about. And I'll instance this one thing, as you know, Marco Rubio's speech in Munich 3 or 4 days ago. He made a very cogent and coherent speech about America and Europe's relationships. But he specifically mentioned the contribution of the Ulster Scots to the creation of the United States.
Yeah, and the English.
And the BBC
and others,
didn't report it. So that's called non-information.
He made a passing reference in one sentence. You and I have talked about this.
Well,
he
this
also
is Northern
mentioned
Ireland. This is
England.
Ulster Scots.
The BBC did report his speech, but the BBC reported the significant news value in that speech, which
BBC
is
Northern
a
Ireland
contrast that it had with J.D. Vance's speech the year before, and he was reaching out with an alliance attitude to Europe. So anyway, that's a side issue.
Can I respond to the first
Please
thing
do, because he thinks you don't understand America.
Okay. Well, I would say, first of all, anybody we speak about in the documentary, we approach for comment, we approach for interviews. I had a show called A Delve, which is this independent interview series, and I've had people on that show, and I've had fantastic conversations with people like Jordan Peterson.
Where are the far right in the film?
Well, we tried to get multiple American. We filmed on Capitol Hill. We tried to get multiple American conservatives, multiple American people as part of the MAGA movement. We reached out to absolutely everybody, and these are people that previously would have spoken to me in a different guise or as part of my podcast, but didn't even come back to me when we were reaching out to them to be part of the documentary. So we absolutely tried, reached out to Ted Cruz multiple times, reached out to Marjorie Taylor Greene.
You couldn't get one person to come on from Ireland.
I mean, I can show you
America.
the emails. I mean, it's entirely. We're very transparent.
But do you accept the criticism that you don't have a single voice in the documentary who you would describe as radical right, populist right, or far right? Not one.
I mean, we tried. I mean, but even
do you accept the criticism that they're not there?
The people we spoke to some Democrats, and we also spoke to multiple journalists. So people from legacy media, we tried to get independent journalists in the documentary. We tried to get Barry Weiss a couple of years before she's anything to do with CBS. So we really did reach out to as many independent voices as we could. People
Conor
from legacy
McGregor?
media. We didn't reach out to Conor, no.
Right. Lee, what do you make of it?
I mean, I actually enjoyed it in terms of some of the issues that were going there. And there's some fascinating issues about who are these people. I mean, we can't deny the big game changer in the last 20 years has been this mobile phone that we now have again. 20 years ago, we'd get our sources from BBC, UTV, wherever it happened to be. These small groups, there've always been conspiracy theories around. You can go back centuries. The movie also, the film also talks about, it goes back to the persecution of the Jews. We can go back to the 14th, we can go back to the Middle Ages and the poisoning of the wells and all the rest. We can go all the way further back. They have always existed. There's always been people looking for scapegoats. For wherever these people are receptive to whatever they are in the world, but the world is not going well for them. They are receptive to ideas, and there have always been people out there to push these views forward. The change has been in the last 20 years. Your mobile phone, you can connect to in a series of seconds. You can connect to all sorts of people spreading ideas.
Yeah.
And social influence. I guess I would have liked more of these sort of influencers. Actually, we could do it. We'd have done someone like Nick Fuentes, for example, who, in terms of his views.
We see his face in the documentary.
Maybe he said no. But the question: who are these people? What are they? And I think this was one of the interesting bits about the video, about the film. Who are these people, and what are they getting out of all of this? And some of them, as we know, again, I can list you a whole number of social influences out there. There's a whole tranche of them against the anti-LGBT in a huge way. Then there's transgender. These are being picked up. The algorithms kick in, and people are reading these. Let alone what? And this other, I love more on the video in terms of this misinformation, disinformation idea, and what is more examples of that disinformation. But in general, no, you're setting the scope up, the scope of the piece to discuss this idea. What is there far right? Is it, people don't like the term, is it populist right wing activities?
What do you academics call it?
We play around depending which group we're actually looking at. It's the journalists who talk about far right more than we actually do. It depends on the group that you are looking at. So again, if you want to say, hey, is Trump's GOP far right? Then you can say,
MAGA.
MAGA, here are the definitions. What do we mean? Let's look at.
How would you describe MAGA then?
MAGA in terms is
right-wing populism.
It's certainly populist, and it's certainly definitely on the right. How far it is on the right? I mean, if you take something like the AfD in Germany, the second largest party, they are far right, verging on extreme right.
What makes you far right then?
Far right, essentially, traditionally, is is someone held in terms of the literature. Anti-democrat comes in, the law and order bit comes in, more policing, the nativism, the role of the state, who belongs to the state. Is it civic based or is it ethnic through the blood? In some cases,
you're getting close to fascism.
You can push that down in terms of the control of society, in terms of free speech, in terms of
control of society as well as the fascists. By the way,
there are left-wing populists.
I'll just say, sorry, and just say if you don't mind.
We're losing your film in this conversation.
Nick Fuentes is not. Nick Fuentes is a troll, and Nick Fuentes has said countless times how much he admires Hitler. I've watched hours and hours of Nick Fuentes' show. He is not somebody with anything worthwhile saying. All Nick Fuentes cares about was audience and engagement and trolling. And
Donald Trump had him for dinner.
But it comes out to this idea of the truth. There's left, right, whatever, and we said that before. And the truth.
You deliberately did not include.
No, but I'm not talking about Nick
Trump
Fuentes.
Had dinner with him.
I'm talking about people who give a permission structure to those in positions of power who shape policy and everything else. But if it's raining outside and you ask two people to look out the window and one person says it is and one person says it isn't, then what's the point in platforming the person who says it's not?
I think you may be underestimating the significance of Nick Fuentes.
I'm not underestimating his significance, but I don't think he's a troll. He's not coming with the best of intentions. He's coming just to... he says this himself.
He's a fascist, but we get that.
Yeah.
He's a pro-Hitler fascist. No question about that. But that doesn't mean he doesn't have influence.
Oh, I 100% agree that he has influence. I'm talking about platforming somebody who's going to say stuff to rage.
Platforming?
Yeah.
You're a documentarian.
I mean,
if Hitler was alive today and I had an opportunity to interview him, I would interview him, wouldn't you?
Would I interview Hitler?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, not for this documentary, no. But maybe for a different documentary.
I would interview anybody. But that,
I mean, again, you're talking to somebody who spent an hour and a half talking to Jordan Peterson in the studio and then Dave Rubin. So I've no problem speaking to people and having open conversations.
Jordan Peterson could have been on this, but I think what was really absent...
If you have his email address...
He's not well.
What was really absent was Dublin voices, the Dublin so-called far right. I'm just thinking of one named Malachy Steenson, who's a councillor now, and leading the sort of anti-plantation protests in Dublin, the anti-second plantation protests. He's very coherent, former official Republican. He should be heard, and you can argue with him. I could argue with him, but I think it's very important if you just talk of these people as being rubbish or evil or influenced by somebody else.
Fuentes is, I'm not saying...
but the point is, if you don't have a coherent conversation, the so-called far right, the ultra right, will prosper.
So, for example, Herman Kelly.
Herman
Kelly, the Irish Freedom Party.
Well, he's I know who he is, but what about him, sorry?
You might include him.
You could. And I would have my disagreements with him.
There are now two of those parties because they can't agree on who the leader is.
If you can't, the problem of the Dublin working class in particular, the Sean O'Casey working class, who are now, have always been traditionally difficult, rebellious, disorganised, they're now being organised by ultranationalists, Irish ultranationalists, waving the tricolour, and the tricolour is now going out of fashion as a result. It's hugely important in that respect, but that has to be discussed in those terms.
Why do you think that's happening?
Not in the evil far right.
Why do you think that's happening in Ireland?
I think it's happening because globalism, in a sense, Ireland is a very loyal member of the EU. It's entirely given to that, and any other point of view is hardly allowed to be mentioned. So it's globalism gone rampant.
Who's stopping you from mentioning that? You're mentioning it now.
Who's what?
Well, you're saying it's not allowed to be mentioned.
Because the mainstream media, which you laud in your film...
Mainstream media now.
The laws... Well, William Crawley may be the exception in this term, but the mainstream media, and it's the non-information. I'll give you some examples of non-information of this week.
You just made me sound like a conduit for the far right there.
Well, there's the Marco Rubio, not mentioned in BBC Northern Ireland. There's the trans killings, 2 trans killings in a week. We're not even allowed to know about the one in Rhode Island.
What about the straight killings?
Yeah, no, but it's
why do you call something a trans killing?
You don't balance a killing.
No,
you
why do you
report a
use
killing.
the terms trans killing?
The one in Rhode Island,
if a straight heterosexual kills somebody, we don't say we've had 2 hetero killings this week. We've had 2 white straight killings this week.
Trans are about 0.0001% of the population are trans, and we've had 2 mass murders by trans in America, and the BBC still call those killers females, and they're not.
How many mass murders and how many mass shootings have there been in America in the last year? Do you have those numbers? How many of them were trans? How many of them were whatever? You're othering people. You're using identity politics as well. You're pointing to identity politics.
Which is very plain. The trans...
2 people isn't a statistic. How many people overall, how many mass shootings have there been in the US?
How many becomes a statistic?
Apparently 3 a day. Mass killings.
If it's a tiny, tiny, tiny group that's carrying out a disproportionate number of killings, and I'm not saying that this is because they're trans people are bad or evil, but I'm saying that
killers, though,
they were.
Yeah, but you're using identity politics, and why wouldn't you say heterosexual killers? Why are you using identity?
It's the deceit. We're not even told that they're men.
Can I break in?
Women and the
Lee's
females going
I have
around
to
killing people.
intervene because Lee's too polite to interrupt. I'm not. Go ahead, Lee.
There's a problem here in many ways as well. We can criticise the BBC, criticise other news sources.
Knock your socks off.
But the comes back to if this gets it, and there's many people, many friends, part of my family say they don't like the BBC either. You think, yeah, but hold on a minute here. Here's one source of information. Use other sources of information to back that up as well. But I think this idea of criticising the BBC and other mainstream organisations is people then do start to, hey, it isn't worth listening to the BBC, and they begin to look elsewhere. And then you're fascinated, which your listeners may have answers to, where are they getting their information from? Mm-hmm. Where are they actually looking? And this is why the mobile phone into social media becomes problematic, because you may be looking, you may have certain ideas, and whatever we think, lots of people have very negative views about immigration. You hear them all the time. You hear them on the train, you hear them on the bus if you're there thinking. So they are open to hearing these views about anti-immigration because they see it as a problem, and then you get this small group, larger group. Then do some of these views become more problematic? For example, look at this week about Rupert Lowe again, splitting for suspended from reform, but he's talking about remigration. Now, we talk about some of the issues about the far right. Yeah. Populist right. One of those themes is remigration. You see it in Germany, you see it in France.
I'm old enough to remember the National Front sent them home. That's remigration, isn't it?
Germany, Friedrich Merz has asked the Syrians to go home. Is that remigration? Is that an evil thing by a Christian Democrat?
You could take a step further back and say, hey, was Merkel right in the first place to take these 1 million people in? There's a problem in all of this as well, is that birth rates in these countries are collapsing, so they actually need more people actually in. Most of those Syrians that arrived were essentially professionals. They slotted in quite quickly, but what do you want to do? The problem is with many of these people.
They couldn't have slotted in quite quickly. That's just a nonsense.
They have the ones that professionals have actually integrated into gaps into the actual.
He's talking about high professional educated Syrians.
This is the sort of meme about engineers floating into Dover. It's just nonsense.
Yeah. Somebody's asked a question here about Enoch Burke.
Yeah.
How does Enoch Burke
I don't think
Enoch Burke not at all in your story.
Character at all. I think he's been amplified by the media who turn up every time he stands outside that gate.
Can we take a call? Here's Liam. Hi, Liam.
Hello.
Hey, Liam. Welcome.
I think as far as Ireland's concerned, it's not far right. It's about the survival of the local population. You have a health service that's overrun. You have a health service that's shortening people's lives and killing people because of lack of treatment. And then you look at, you have something like in Ireland, there's a whole 80,000 Ukrainians and 100,000 others, and you're not nationalities, and you're not against anybody. But your local health service, and you have a budget where 82% of that budget, and it's going to be more now, but the barristers looking for more money, your budget's gone. Mm-hmm. And that is the situation you have. And the poor are paying for the elites' pay increases. There's no mention about the pensioners. These people are on salaries. Pensioners are not, and they're looking for more money. So the vulnerable are being attacked, and the politicians are allowing that to happen. They have a huge salary. They can pay for themselves and their families. The public don't have the same resources. Yeah. And essentially what the politicians are doing, they're attacking their own electorate by allowing that situation to exist.
Liam, thank you very much. Interesting points. It's a capacity issue. It's about finite resources. That doesn't make you racist. That doesn't make you far right. I suppose you could add to what Liam's saying that you actually had a government strategy, didn't you, in the Republic? Concerns about a workforce crisis down the road and a deliberate policy to bring more people from overseas into the country to stave off that.
Well, there are massive, deeper and longer issues there.
None of this makes you right wing, right? None of this makes
absolutely.
you
I mean, people
right.
have concerns, and I'm from a working class area in the north side of Dublin. I get that. I'm from Coolock. I get that absolutely completely. People should be allowed.
Are you from Coolock?
Yeah, I'm from Coolock.
We had those guys from Coolock who came to Belfast, didn't we?
Yeah,
carrying the tricolour.
Yeah,
meeting with the loyalists. Yeah, some of the loyalists.
Weird exclusionary nationalism, weaponising the flag.
The nations exist to be distinct, separate, sovereign, and of one outlook, one religion, one language. And once you start eroding that,
I think that's called ethno-nationalism, isn't it?
Well, it's called nation building.
Well, no, it's a bit more than that.
Look, the French speak French.
Yeah,
they aren't out.
What do the Belgians speak?
Well, that was a false, that was an artificial nation created in the 19th century because of the Dutch and religion and the Flemish and so on.
What about the UK in 1707? What were the language?
They all spoke English.
They all spoke English.
Yes, the Scots spoke English.
Is that not a little bit naive in 2026? That people are going to travel around the world. We've got all this amazing technology. We can fly to places now. It's not like it was before.
All right.
And if you look at Irish people specifically, how many emigrated over the last 150 years? And how many of these type of conversations were happening in the US and in other countries?
But once the nation state becomes eroded and the immigration levels are so high that things become problematic, you've got to recognise that is an issue that has to be addressed.
I want to bring in Professor McGowan.
So when you talk about, what is problematic, how do you see that? Where is the problem from your perspective then?
Well, the caller came in with restricted resources, housing. I mean, if you bring in 100,000 Ukrainians, you have to house them somewhere. That means 100,000 locals don't get houses. Now, that's reality. You have to face up to it. But just to sort of building more houses isn't the answer inevitably because...
Yeah, I mean, we were talking like that for ages in many ways. But the idea of the nation states are still there, but they are changing. All states, all systems change over time. People arrive, people go. We can look at the UK in terms of historical origins. The US is a classic example.
Go into reverse. Everything doesn't go on in the same trajectory forever, and things are reversing, and that's a reality you have to face up to.
Can I bring in with another call? Here's John. He's been waiting a while. Hey, John.
Hi, William.
Take it away.
Just a quick point before I make my point. I mean, I wish Mr. Dudgeon would stop using that term and mainstream media. What does that mean? Does that mean is that news outlets that go with facts and give a balanced view? Because anyway, but leaving that aside, I think we need to distinguish between people who are genuinely right wing and conservative, not a view that I hold, but and those who are just here in it for the grift. So if I put something on social media which is reasonable and gives a balanced views, it will not get much interest. But if I make some extreme statement saying the country's been taken over by Muslims or blacks or et cetera, so and if you're a grifter, you obviously know how you have to make money is to be more extreme, to be more radical, and that is certainly something that has been imported from America, and not necessarily the bigger issue, but that's certainly something which America is well ahead of us on in that regard.
Yeah, hatred is literally a business plan for some people. Thank you very much, John. Pat's there too in Ballyghasseen.
Good afternoon, William. The name that I would like to introduce into the conversation, sort of is Steve Bannon in terms of populism, right or left-wing populism, yeah?
Yeah.
And my understanding, if you remember, Bannon was the main man behind the strategic commander behind Trump and still with Trump in terms of his getting the presidency. But Bannon made a statement at a very early stage when he was touring Europe and he was looking to get Britain involved through Nigel Farage and the Brexit campaign, that when he was choosing to promote his populism, he chose specifically to appeal to the right wing rather than the left, which would be in his natural direction, because he felt that the right wing are more likely to accept his views on immigration, and immigration was at the very heart of his campaign. Yep.
I can go further back with Steve Bannon. You go back to the noughties. He actually talks about it. Unless the US does something, there'll be an Islamic Republic of the United States further down the line. So it's all this idea about. Are you in what is happening? Are they trying to find other? So if we talk about the nation state, who belongs to the nation state? Is it everyone? Is it people coming in? So this is a question. You find with others far right, they exclude certain groups, be it LGBT groups, be it transgender groups, be it other ethnic groups. So this becomes problematic. Who then does belong? Is it about tribal?
That doesn't follow. Look at Reform. It's 3 of the 6 top Reform members are Asians, but. And a significant number of Reform members are gay. I mean, you're setting up a false analysis here. The mainstream media is no longer the dominant media, and that's a reality you have to recognise. You can't just condemn people for looking at X.
I'm not condemning anyone. I'm saying in terms of if you actually look at what is it these parties stand for. Reform is playing, you could argue the question, is Reform a far-right party or is it just a centre-right party? So leaving that one aside, they could be very strategic. To do far-right, you're looking at who are the actual... How do they see society? How do they want society shaped? Are we talking here about tribalism? Is it about tribes, which also comes back to in the movie about which tribe do you belong to? And then you come up problems. If I belong to this tribe and I give everything I have to this...
But do you think there's a bigger strategy? I mean, all the riots going on, the protests, is there some grand strategy behind it all?
I don't think there is. I think
demolish democracy in the Western world or something like that.
Unless you could build a political party coming from that.
Do you see any kind of grand strategy?
Steve Bannon is an incredibly smart human being, and he was one of the big reasons why I think Trump won in 2016. And he's the man who's talked about this idea of flooding the zone constantly, which is the news from the White House. It is constant.
He's great at marketing. He's great at manipulation.
But it's very, very difficult for legacy media, for independent media, for anybody to keep up with the volume of news stories coming from the White House, coming from the Trump administration.
Difficult to keep up with the volume of his emails with Jeffrey Epstein as well, if you go and have a look.
Well, indeed, but the reality is Steve Bannon influenced Trump 1 and he was dismissed by Trump. Trump 2 is a completely different animal.
He says that himself. He comes and goes with Trump.
Well, that may be true, but Trump 2 is really different, and with people like Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance behind him, it's a much more operationally successful process, and it is America first. Yeah. America is a nation state in its own right. Nothing about that. But the problem is, if America behaves in a nationalist way, everyone squeals.
America was a construction as well. I mean, you dismissed Belgium as a construction. America used to be a slither down the east coast.
All nation states
increasing the land,
are artificial.
And when they increased the land, they brought new languages in. The Dutch up in Michigan and the French in Louisiana.
That's in Marco Rubio's.
The Spanish in California.
If you'd read
Marco
Rubio's speech, you'd have heard that.
Marco Rubio's not the president.
How on earth is America a classic nation state when you've got these Californian Spanish speakers over there and the Dutch up there and the English over here and the Ulster Scots over there?
Because by Stalin's definition of a nation state, it's got a common religion, a common language.
Patchwork.
It's a coherent frontier. All those reasons make it a nation state.
They've always had different languages.
And Spanish is nearly...
There was a time when more people spoke French in Louisiana than English.
Yeah, but things change.
They've always had that.
Things change, William.
You
must
change.
recognise that America is a nation.
I was saying to you earlier, things change.
Maybe hateful for a lot of Western liberals. America is a nation. Ireland is a nation, and a lot of Irish nationalists are pissed off.
That was a very clever move, given that I was the one suggesting to you that things changed and that you were having a bit of nostalgia.
Can I say just one more thing? I don't think that Donald Trump is an ideologue. I don't think he is at all. I think he's driven by ego and money, right? I think Steve Bannon's an ideologue. I think Stephen Miller's an ideologue. You keep pointing out Marco Rubio, who is... whether you're doing it on purpose or not, I don't know. I only heard snippets of that speech the other day, but he is seen as the one sane person in that administration.
Anymore. He's regarded
after that
speech. Trump.
I don't know if he'd be.
We'll be talking about him tomorrow with Cuba.
But he's not. Donald Trump is not an ideologue, but he's surrounded by them, and that's the difference between his first term and his second term.
I've got to stop. Do you think what we're talking about now, which? And incidentally, this film is an argument, right? It's not trying. I think to be fair to your film, Mike, it's not trying to be one of these kind of BBC type. On the one hand, on the other kind of films, it's making an argument. It's bringing in evidence. You may not like the argument, but that's what you do when you make an argument. It's a well-made film. Do you think that your film is going to be more of our future?
I think if it opens up conversations, what I would hope...
because it's not a great future.
I don't want to be nihilistic about it, but I would hope that the film would cause people to have conversations, like my own mother, my own like older people in my family, like cousins, to have these conversations and to think about othering people and grievance politics, and having people pointed out as they're the reason why X, Z or Y is the reason why your life isn't as good as it couldn't be, and ignoring the nuances and the policy and the failures of government that led to those grievances.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. It certainly got us a great conversation with you. Enjoyed it. Don't pretend you didn't.
Well, I kept my temper.
Yeah, you were very good, Jeff. I thought you were excellent. Thank you very much to Mike Sheridan. The film is Amplified, the exportation of the culture wars. I think it's on Amazon Prime, isn't it?
Be on Amazon Prime and Apple from Friday.
All right, brilliant. And Lee McGowan from Queen's University. You on Amazon Prime yet?
I am, yeah.
Fantastic. And Jeff Dudgeon, he's negotiating a deal right now with Netflix.
Well, I'm an independent commentator now, William.
Of course you are. From the Free Speech Union. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
On BBC iPlayer.